Welcome, everyone, to tonight's author chat. I'm talking with Sherry Thomas, the author of the Lady Sherlock series. I know a lot of you have been really excited about this author chat. You want to hear from Sherry, and so do I. I have lots of great questions for her, but I want to know what you want to know. So please post your comments and questions, and I will be checking those throughout the night. And so I can pose those to her, and we can chat about what you want to hear. So first off, Sherry, thank you so much for joining me.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having
me. First off, I suspect most of the people watching know exactly who you are and adore your books just like I do. But for anybody who's a newbie, can you just kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and what you write and a little bit about the Lady Sherlock series?
Right. So I am Sherry Thomas, and I have written a fair number of various things. I started out in historical romance. I wrote 9 historical romance. Along the way, I also wrote a young adult fantasy trilogy. And I think I self-published a contemporary romance also. And that was also around the time I switched to historical romance, historical mysteries, the Lady Sherlock series to be specific. And between books 3 and 4 of Lady Sherlock, I also wrote an adaptation of the original Ballad of Mulan in the English language. So various things I have written, but mostly these days I am concentrating on the historical mystery side and writing the Lady Sherlock books.
Yes, and tell us a little bit about Lady Sherlock, because it's a brilliant spin on the Sherlock canon. I guess, how did you get into that? How did you approach that?
The long version was I first had the idea I want to do something like that when I read Laurie R. King's The Beekeeper's Apprentice, in which she gave Sherlock Holmes an equal female partner. It was something I had never seen before, and I was blown away by both the idea and the execution of it. I think that that first book is still a true classic of the Sherlock Holmes prestige, that universe. And at the time I thought, wow, it would be so cool to do something like this if I could do it. But I think that was just around the time when I either got my first contract or was close to getting my first contract. And so was like, I had just barely begun to do anything in historical romance. And so there didn't seem any room to mixing a different genre or anything like that. And besides, I wasn't sure I could handle anything as, plot heavy as mystery. I was never a plotter in particular. So then fast forward a bunch of years, BBC Sherlock came out. And if we recall back to the first season or 2, there was just so much creative energy in that series. And I had that feeling like, wow, it would be so cool if I could do something like this. Take the old canon and give an interesting new twist to it. Around that time was when I had was about to run out of ideas for historical romances, and also I had written what had turned out to be a mystery in the second book of the young adult fantasy series. So I was a little more serious about writing a Sherlock Holmes book, and I also was more confident in myself. So I thought, what could I do if I did try this? Moriarty already gave Sherlock Holmes an equal female partner. The new TV series already made him contemporary. And over on CBS in Elementary, they already made Watson a woman. It seems like the logical extension, like the only thing left to do was to make Sherlock Holmes, the original character, a woman. And so I actually Googled, and it didn't seem like it has been done a lot. Like there has been various women being the actual protagonist of a Sherlock Holmes story, but none has, as far as I could tell at the time, they were, some of them, they made Mrs. Hudson solve the puzzle. Some of them made like Irene Adler do, or Sherlock Holmes' descendant, or someone else, but none had actually said, what if Sherlock Holmes was a woman? So I thought, well, let me do this then. and that's what I did. I first pitched the idea to my young adult publisher. Actually, I was like, hey, how about Growlock set in contemporary era? I was gonna set it like basically right at the school my kids were going to, and have the characters live right in my neighborhood. I was like, oh, no research. But my YA publisher actually didn't bite. She's like, well, mysteries don't sell too well in YA. What can you do with information like that? You go, thank you very much. So then I turned around to my historical romance publisher and say, what about you guys? And I lucked out in the sense that I think it was 2014. Anybody with a slight interest in recent publishing history would know that 2014 was when authors, particularly romance authors, were leaving publishers in droves because they could do it better in self-publishing.
Oh yeah.
And so I think normally I might face a little more pushback if I just said I don't want to do historical romance. But at that time I think they were a little more desperate to retain authors. Like they actually did not give me any trouble at all. I gave them a proposal and they said, okay, how about 3 books in this? And we're like, good, let's go.
Here we go.
That was pretty much what had happened.
And I love how Charlotte is like the complete opposite physically of what we imagine Sherlock. I mean, like, and how she dresses in the patterns and like the cake and all. It's just wonderful. I love it. I just love it.
Oh, thank you.
I think I was really inspired to do that.
I didn't start out thinking about that. I wrote like a few pages of a first draft with Sherlock Holmes being the exact physical equivalent of Sherlock Holmes. Was like I think that was like the only thing. Maybe she even had an aquiline nose. Basically, you just imagine like from the 80s BBC Sherlock, Jeremy Brett. If you imagine how that character would have looked as a woman, like the way he dressed, the way he appeared, like that was sort of my initial concept. I wrote like a page and a half of this and said, you know what, this is really boring.
I love it. It's a great
what is the point of turning this whole character, gender bending this whole character, only to make them exactly the same as the original? I was like, I might as well take the opportunity to go to the other end of the spectrum. And it's often been and I thought to myself, I just don't see a character like this very often. I don't see whether Charlotte's fashionable is up for debate. But let's say for somebody who's as interested in clothes, as interested in looking cute, as interested in things that are traditionally associated with the very feminine aspect of being a woman, and therefore not taken terribly seriously by the wider world. I was like, what if my character is instead like, you could really walk and chew gum at the same time. It's like, there's no saying that, and I was inspired by a friend of mine who like loves her lipsticks, loves her makeup, loves her clothes, and the woman has all the degrees under the sun,
right.
And so all the English degrees and MFA to boot. So I was always like, yeah, why not? Why don't we see more literary characters like that, like women who are both smart and just like are allowed to be more feminine. They don't have to be smart and just like very severe.
Right, exactly. Yes. I also love, you have such brilliant, lovely little comedic moments in your books. The beginning, so Miss Moriarty, I presume, it's book 6. It just came out. For those of you who haven't read it yet, you need to snatch it up. And the beginning, the letters between Charlotte and Ingram, they are a hoot. I laughed out loud. They're just delightful. And I mean, really, a lot of the very beginning of the book is a very comedic. You have some little comedic gems in there that really break up what could be such a very intense, tense moment. And I just love it. I mean, does that come naturally to you, or is it something you have to work at? It just seems to just naturally flow. I mean,
it's very interesting because I don't know whether either you or anyone watching knows anything about my romance writing history, but
I love your romance, historical romance. I've read them. Yes.
I believe my reputation on that side is more the recently one of my friends sent me a a kind of meme that they made for a read along of some of my romance, and it says, Sherry Thomas is pain, darlings. Anybody who says differently is trying to sell you something. and that made me laugh really hard because yes, my historical romances, I wouldn't say they were overly serious, but the characters tend to have real problems. They have real emotional
yes.
Not that like they have psychological problems, but they have a lot of they have really hurt each other. A lot of times I write reunion stories, and these are stories where people have really hurt each other. They have really damaged each other, and just like along the way. So in like having them go through it and then coming through the reconciliation is like I remember writing one of my own books, when I was just crying, and I was like, as I was crying so hard and my head hurt, and I don't usually have headaches very often, I thought to myself, I really need for other people to shed more tears over this book than I did. Like otherwise it would be kind of stupid if I I cried more just writing this book myself than anybody cried reading it. But actually I am not that kind of person at all. I don't know why I like that kind of romance. I like a really intense romance, so that's what I write. I think the only time I deliberately tried to be funny in His at Night, it actually ended up like people in that book are more damaged than almost they are anywhere else. So with the Lady Sherlock books, actually it's not so bad, because like it's not primarily about people who have injured each other or are in the middle of injuring each other, so it's a little more of my natural personality coming out. I do have a mind that finds such things very funny, as I think in one of the earlier books, Charlotte was talking about how she had propositioned Lord Ingram a few times in her life, and she had even bought herself I think maybe a copy of Fanny Hill, which was like actually the main dirty book, and I think Mrs. Watson, who was having a conversation with her, was like, "What the heck did you do with it afterwards?" She said, "Oh, I later sold it to somebody else." And to another friend, a guy friend who grew up with her, like a childhood friend. And Mrs. Watson was like, "And what did Lord Ingram think about that?" And she said, "Well, Lord Ingram actually broke her the deal." So for some reason, these kind of things just seem funny to me. Like like especially like both like young ladies reading dirty books, and seemingly like straight-laced young men actually like being the middleman in the sale of said dirty book. things like that just strike me as like little details I would enjoy, so I put them in. And the letters you mentioned also at the beginning of book 6 is the same, because I think Charlotte has been like poking at Lord Ingram all their like ever since they were adolescent, going like basically, do you dare like go to bed with me,
right?
And he sometimes is genuinely like scared, but in this case he's not so much anymore, and he's like he's playing along with her, and sometimes she's the one who's actually taken aback because she's not used to it.
Well, I love it. I know readers love it. I adore it. It's great. That whole relationship is fabulous. Like I just can't wait for each book to see how it's evolving more. You mentioned a little bit earlier about how you weren't a big plotter, which I find so interesting, because your plots are so intricate. They're really nuanced and you have all these threads. You know, I was going to ask you, how do you approach plotting each of these books? I mean, do you have them planned out ahead of time? Is it you just write off the seat of your pants? I mean, how do you approach it? Because they seem like you have this master plan you've already figured out.
No, I don't. I do it backwards. I do it backwards in the sense that you know, after you like I fixed my the book I sold first, Private Arrangement, was like under my bed for 5 years, and then I came across it like in about a home improvement, and it was just this box of papers I was sitting there. I was like, what the heck is that? And so when I read it, I was like, oh, like it's terrible, but I know how to fix it. And I actually did. I didn't know how to fix that book. Like the inspiration just came, like struck me all of a sudden. And it was mostly like right on the money. It's how to fix that particular book. And then I thought, oh my God, I totally finally learned how to write a romance. Like, no, I didn't. I didn't, like, I accidentally got the story structure of Private Arrangement right. I would go on to suffer a lot in the writing of the next 3 books because now they're under a deadline. And my editor was basically had to like drag me through each of them and try to fix, like point me to what needs to be done to like fix the plot and, you know, fix the structure. So it's not like just very flaccid, kind of like scene after scene. And so after that trial by multiple bouts of fire, it kind of became kind of like ingrained in me. Like, okay, I may not know what necessarily is going to happen, but I kind of started to know that something needs to happen. And I started to have a good idea of that I may not need to know, may not necessarily know what's going to happen, but I need to know it happen, and I know it needs to happen like about here.
Right.
So it's kind of like that kind of I don't know whether you call it instinct because it was developed later. So like
straight up, I know the more you write, it's almost like it is like an instinct or an intuition. Like you just know when the beats need to happen. Yeah, exactly.
So let's say this sort of a groping skill. It's not an instinct; it's a groping skill you later develop. So now when I write, I'm not terribly worried if I don't know who's going to die and who's going to do it going in. As long as I leave room for it, as long as I'm like kind of writing toward some sort of like a major reveal or a major reversal or a major secret, that'll be good enough. I think like in Lady Sherlock 6, I must have been like at least 50% way into the book before I figured out, you know, or before I had an idea even what that secret was going to be. I was like, I keep thinking like there's a secret to this community of occult practitioners, but what the heck is the secret?
I love it. I love it.
So I'm sort of like the spectator too. I'm like, so I figure, okay, what if I were to shoot this as a TV show, right? Like nobody knows at the beginning. Right. Even the viewers would only see what's going on and hope to gather some clues. So I am the writer. I'm also like I know this has to happen. Like if people goes here, they have to do some talking and they have to do some looking around and they have to do some, you know, this and that, some character stuff. And then later on, once I finally figure out what is the secret, I can go back and plant the clues accordingly and you know, the red herrings too, correctly.
Right. So. Cool. Okay. That's interesting to know because I mean, it really is. It's beautifully.
How do you do it?
I do it a little bit the same. I do plot. I call myself a plotter. I'm like a real mix. Like I have to have basically kind of an outline to follow where I kind of know where the major things are going to come. And like the emotional arc and all that stuff. But then I just jump in and write. And like, I find if I plot too tightly, I like feel too constrained. Like I can't, you know what I mean? I can't work out the book. I need to let the characters work it out themselves. And so the ending always changes. I always have to, you know, which is part of the fun. It's part of the magic of writing. I mean, I know there's some people that know every single thing from the beginning, but I just can't work that way. I'm like, I would be bored.
I wouldn't even know whether I would be bored because I would have no idea how to work like that. It's not like I've never. It's not like I've never outlined. I feel like I am one of those people who are like, if I hear something's good or works well, I'm always willing to give it a try.
Right.
So I have outlined more than once in my life. It's just that whatever I outline typically never come to pass. Like before I write a book, I think this, that, and on paper it all sounds reasonable.
Right.
Once I go in, like I wouldn't even get through half the outline before I go like, yeah, it's missing something. It's not quite right. Yeah. So.
And I always tell other authors, I'm like, every author's process is totally different. They're in some way from others. So you just have to find what works for you and stop trying to force yourself to do it how somebody else does it, just because you think maybe that's the better way. No, however it works for you is the way it works for you. And so, you know, good.
I'm actually still open to like be able to improve my method. It's just that I am not particularly upset. Not that I ever was. You know, I don't hold out too much hope it's going to get changed drastically at this stage.
Well, whatever you're doing is working.
Whatever I'm doing takes a lot of time. I guess everybody wants to like shrink down the amount of time, right? Even if I don't want to write more books, I would like to take more time off.
Right. Well, one thing I wanted to talk to you about was Moriarty, because this is the first time in this 6th book that he steps on the stage, really. Like he's part of it. And, you know, first off, I want to say the way you had him hire Charlotte, I just thought was so clever, because you just set up all this tension, this great sense of tension right away. I mean, like all these questions about, okay, is he telling the truth or is he tricking her? I mean, does he really have a daughter? Like, I mean, it was just wonderful. Like great idea. And what I want to know is, so with my Verity Kent series, I've set up an arch nemesis for the first time for my my heroine, and I'm always just curious. I'm really curious about how other people handle that, because it is, when you're taking on an arch nemesis, it's such a big villain, you know what I mean, versus just that one little plot in a book. And so, you know, like, I guess, how are you approaching that element? You know, and also Moriarty, I mean, you're taking on Sherlock and you're taking on Moriarty. I mean, so I guess I'm just curious how you're handling it, because like sometimes I feel like I'm stumbling so badly with mine.
I wouldn't know how I'm handling exactly, because this is also the first time I'm doing something like this. Sherlock Holmes, like real Sherlock Holmes aficionados would know that in the original canon, Moriarty actually plays very minor role. I mean, in the sense that, no, of course, Arthur Conan Doyle says he's the arch nemesis. He's the one, you know, with whom Sherlock Holmes, you know, had to kill him by falling over Reichenbach Falls with him together. He's like that hard to get rid of and whatnot. But I always believe, but I always believe if it's someone's really important, that you spend ink on it. And he's only like in very few stories. Yeah. In other stories, he's basically like not there at all. And it's just like Sherlock Holmes investigating various things, has nothing to do with Moriarty. Yet, because after all, Arthur Conan Doyle is still set with his, you know, own pen, that, you know, with Watson's own pen, that this is the great nemesis, arch enemy of Sherlock Holmes. So I think Moriarty has taken on this huge, like much huger role in the popular imagination, and also because a lot of Sherlock Holmes, a lot of works in the Sherlock Holmes prestige also take a crack at Moriarty. So at this point, if you're writing Sherlock Holmes and there's no Moriarty, it's almost like there's something missing. You know, it's like salt and pepper. You can't just have one and not have the other. So I think the only thing I knew about Moriarty in this book, I mean, in this whole series, was that I thought BBC Sherlock did him dirty, or actually, I thought BBC Sherlock did themselves a great disfavor by getting rid of him so soon. And for for no like real reason that I could quite understand. Like one day he just suddenly went bananas. I'm sorry to spoil, and just like decided to throw himself off Rock and Buckle. What the heck? And I thought the series suffered after it. So the only thing I thought was like, okay, I am not going to get rid of my Moriarty too early. And in being careful about not getting rid of him too early, I was like, this guy has never even stepped on page yet. So I thought, okay, I actually don't know how many books the first story arc, great big story arcs can cover, but I always thought maybe 10 to 12. Maybe because in Louise Penny's Inspector Gamache books, that's about how many books it took to cover the first great story arc. And so I thought, that seems like the right amount. And then I thought, okay, I'm already at book 6. So theoretically, halfway through the story arc, Moriarty hasn't come on page yet. It's about time. And then I thought, oh, but I don't want him to come on page as a outright antagonist right away, because he and Charlotte have been like sort of circling each other, but they have never been in open conflict. I didn't want the open conflict to erupt right away. So I was like, oh, how would it be fun if like he actually came as a client? That way it could be kind of like a sideways thing, that everybody will be nervous and nobody would know what he wants. And that was a general idea.
I love it. Well, it was smart. In my opinion, it was really smart.
Thank you.
I've been kind of approaching it the same way, like, because it's like, if you're going to have somebody who's an overarching villain, that there's some big thing, that's happening, you can only feed it a little bit at a time. Like if you throw too much at once and it's over, and then it's like, what's the point? So it's like that shadow games, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we have a question. Let's see. We had somebody say, wow, I never thought you could write a book without knowing the outcome. So you gals don't actually even imagine an eventual ending. And I mean the ending of the series. It just depends on how it unfolds from book to book. So I mean, like, you don't have the ending of the of your series in mind.
I don't. I barely like. I've started book 7 just recently, and wrote 30,000 words, and have stopped, abandoned that draft, and started the second draft, because that draft has served me as far as it could in terms of like exploring what could and should happen in that book. When I abandoned that draft was when I actually finally decided who did it and why.
Right.
And so I have used my release week as an excuse to like not write anymore. But I have to go back to work pretty soon, because now the hard part is, after you have the idea, how you execute it is actually the hard part.
Right.
Like you have all these concepts of the threads you like to pull together, but.
So do you like flesh your books out more with each draft?
I flesh my books out. I never trim them. I almost never trim them down, because it's just hard. I'm always like, oh, I still have to write this. Oh, I still have to write it. Still missing this, that, as either connecting or something, or like character development or emotional beat. And it's like, it's always missing something as I go from draft to draft.
Right.
So yeah, you can, but it's not, but when I start the second draft, I do have a fairly concrete idea of what I want to happen at the end. I just don't know how to make it look good in the meanwhile.
Yeah, for me, a lot of times, sometimes I know what the ending's going to be pretty early on when I'm writing, but a lot of times I purposely don't, because I find that whatever I planned, I come up with a better idea anyway. So why am I wasting my time plotting something that's going to change? So
it's not as if I would know exactly what is done. Like there's a lot of things I don't know. What I do, just all I know is that, okay, I describe it sometimes as, I am standing like before a jungle, and somewhere beyond the jungle, there's a hill with a castle on it. I can see the castle. So at this point, like in the beginning, I don't see anything. Like first draft, I'm just sort of trying to figure out the stuff. I don't see anything. In the second draft, I see the castle on the hill, but I'm still not quite sure how to hack past this jungle to get there.
That's a
So I
great
don't know,
analogy.
like, yeah, don't know whether I'm gonna fall into a ravine along the that sort of thing, get washed away by raging currents. But yeah.
So Pam wants to know, Sherry, did you include Moriarty because you felt like you had to, since he was in the Conan Doyle books, or were you interested in just doing it for yourself? I mean, did you feel like you had to, I guess?
I sort of felt like I had to, and also because it it I think it is in general good telling. I mean, good storytelling to pit your protagonist up against problems slash antagonists that seem greater than they are, or that are greater than they are.
Yes.
It just seemed like a very fundamental tenet of storytelling. You have to give them big problems,
right?
And they
especially when your heroine is so clever. I mean, like, seems like they can just solve anything. So you got to give them something that's really a challenge. Like
right for your Sherlock Holmes class characters, they really need someone to pit themselves against. They have to, otherwise they'll just be like flouncing through life, going like shooting up that 7% solution.
Well, if you guys have any other questions, go ahead and pop them in. I'm checking now. So anything that comes up, I will throw out there. So I also wanted to talk about Livia. I love Charlotte's sister. I love their relationship. I love the whole thing that's developing with her and Mr. Marbleton, and all of that. I think it's delightful. What inspired you, I guess, to give her that sister character?
I just like to give my characters a Pride and Prejudice background whenever I can, because I find that it's just so funny, that lots of daughter, no sons,
yes.
And like, that kind of impoverished background. You can just go that in a lot of different directions. I gave that to the heroine in my romance, The Luckiest Lady in London. I gave her that background, and I was like, no, I'm still not tired of you. I'm giving Charlotte like more or less the same background, but with worse parents. Yeah, and so because and part of the reason is also I want the question from which all of the Lady Sherlock story character and whatnot flowed was, what if Sherlock Holmes had been born, or someone with the mind and the temperament of Sherlock Holmes had been born a woman in like the 1860s and had to grow up in that era with all the constraints and stuff. So what I wanted was, in a way, for Charlotte to have both experienced a lot of the frustration, both as a woman and as someone who's sort of on the spectrum, who's like on the higher functioning end of the spectrum. But I also want her to have been like greatly loved. I want her to be. Yes. I want her to have come out of that not damaged, but still like realistic, but very bold and very centered.
Yes.
And it took me this long to realize this, but of course Livia was that person for her. Like Charlotte had been Livia's rock, but Livia was also Charlotte's rock. Livia loved Charlotte unconditionally.
Right.
She was much more like Charlotte's mother than their mother ever was like Charlotte's mother. And so that's part of it. Another part was I kind of wanted a normal person around Charlotte.
Yes,
someone like, I kind of, because Charlotte is such an unusual character, so you have to surround her with other people who act as a surrogate reader, who like react in ways that your readers react, and go like, what? What are you saying? What are you doing? Like, I can't believe you did that. And also a third thing was, it's partly, I don't know whether in general women are all like this, but I feel like among the writers I've known, there are just so many beautiful, lovely, talented, wonderful women who have zero confidence. who have zero belief in themselves, or maybe zero is too much to say, who have, whose self-belief in their self-worth is nowhere commensurate of what they deserve, right, to believe. They deserve to realize that they are these fantastic people, and they somehow think so little of them. And it's like, I've seen so much of it among my friends, and it kind of hurts me to see that, because that is actually going to be one of their sources of great pain in their life, is because they don't believe it. And if they cannot believe it, if they cannot believe themselves, then they also believe that other people will not believe in them, will not have faith in them, will not have, will not find them to be worthwhile individuals. And so I kind of wanted Livia to start like that, to start like so many of my girlfriends. Yes. And I wanted her to grow, and I wanted her to, like, to see herself as her friends truly see her, to see her true worth, and to see her true value, and to see her true beauty. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So
I love
this
that.
is Livia is my homage to all the great women I know who don't know that they are that great.
Aw, I love it. I love it. That's wonderful. I mean, you have so many great characters, especially I love Ingram, and there's a lot of good male characters too, but you have so many great female characters. Mrs. Watson, oh my goodness. I feel like there's always more layers peeling back and mysteries about her. I mean, we have lots more to learn about her, don't we?
Right, because she's lived, and we only know a little bit about her.
Right. Yeah. I love all the little things that we learn every book, and more come out, and yeah, it's good. It's wonderful. Missy, do we have any other questions? We have lots of which are great. So, well, I'm going to probably wrap us up then. I am so glad that you joined me, Sherry. This was lovely to talk with you. This is actually the first time we've met face to face. So
I know.
And it's I can't wait to see you in person someday. So
right. Let's fingers crossed that writers conference start again, and events start happening. Maybe some book festival in the future.
Yeah. Right. Yes, absolutely. So this was lovely, and I love the Lady Sherlock series. So let me ask, what do you have coming up next? I know Miss Moriarty, I presume, just released, for those of you who have not read it yet. But what's next for you? Are you working on the next Lady Sherlock or something else?
Right. Since this book just came out, I don't have anything on my event horizon at all. I need to buckle down and work on Lady Sherlock 7, and hopefully it will be ready for publication by fall next year. And hopefully a little earlier than November to get out of the way of the midterm elections.
Oh yes.
That's the thing about having a fall book. You're always like,
I know my debut was on election day of a presidential year, I think it was, and it was like not the best timing.
No. Yeah. So, and what about you? What do you have coming up?
So I have the next Lady Darby is out April 26th. It's called A Perilous Perspective. And then I'm working on Verity Kent. I'm finishing up Verity Kent. Oh gosh, which book's it? Verity Kent 6. I can't remember.
I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you do it. So.
And it's called A Certain Darkness, and that'll be out next autumn. So yeah, I'm trying to finish that up. So I'm in those final.
And are you writing? Are you writing more of which one is the World War I series?
That's the Verity Kent series, yes. So book 6, that's what I'm finishing up right now. I have at least 3 more after that coming for Verity Kent. I just got a new contract. And then Lady Darby, there's at least another and hopefully more. So it's one of those things. We're always waiting till the next contract, right? So awesome.
Yeah, that's actually the World War I time setting is very interesting, because I was like, there's a lot of Victorian, and a lot of maybe later World War II, but World War I seems kind of like
yeah. I mean, there was a bit of a uptick on it with Downton Abbey and all of that, but it's kind of faded a little bit now. There's so much World War II, and then there's
right.
But I'm really loving the era that I'm in, especially because I made Verity a spy. So I get to do like flashbacks of the war, but then also like all of this stuff after.
The 20s, yeah.
Yeah. So in like the Irish Revolution and all that stuff. I mean, so I'm getting to dive into some stuff that other people don't always do, which I like to do. I mean, I guess I like to carve myself out little niches between eras that people don't do a lot. Like I did that. And then with Lady Darby, I'm doing 1830s, and then everybody does either Regency or they do Victorian. So they don't do William the Fourth, but there's so much good stuff.
My first historical romance was originally set in the 1830s. Before, like when I redid it, I moved it all the way to the 1890s, which at that time not many people were doing. But yeah, it was like 1830 was just an interesting time when Victoria, really, right around time when Victoria came to the throne. Yeah.
Yes, it's there's so much tumult and changing and all this stuff, and it just doesn't get done a lot. And I love the fashions from the 1830s, especially the early 1830s are horrible. They're so ugly. They're those huge.
Oh, you mean the big gigolo,
yes.
Like the lamp, like the, what do you call those? The big sleeves.
The gigo sleeves. Yeah, I mean they're awful. And so I love having Kira get to make fun of it because she's an artist. Of course, she doesn't want huge sleeves, so yeah, because I mean, when I look at them, I'm like, oh, awful, such a bad fashion era. But yeah, it's fun. So I guess I like those eras, but anyway. Well, thank you everybody for joining us.
Yes, thank you.
Got people saying they're fangirling. So anyway.
I can't see anything, but thank you guys very much. Yes.
So, well, thank you, Sherry, and thank you everyone. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful night.